The first time Isabelle Munro heard the melody, it wasn't from a violin. It was the wind, a soft, lilting hum curling through the cracks of her grandmother's old attic, weaving itself between forgotten trunks and dust-laden shelves. She had been standing there, staring at boxes she wasn't ready to open, when the breeze stirred a sound that made her stop breathing. She closed her eyes. It wasn't a song. It was a memory, pretending to be one. Isabelle had always been a woman of control, poised, ambitious, a marketing executive who could command boardrooms with a glance. But standing in that attic, barefoot on the creaking wooden floor of a New England estate too large for one person, she felt small, unprepared. The house had belonged to her grandmother, Eleanor Munro, a woman known for her elegance, her sharp wit, and most notably, her music. Eleanor had been a celebrated violinist in her time, though Isabelle knew her best as the woman who baked lavender shortbread and hummed lullabies on stormy nights. But Isabelle hadn't touched a violin since Eleanor passed away 5 years ago. Yet here she was, back in the house she had once run away from, tasked with sorting out a life packed away in boxes and drawers. She wasn't here for sentiment. She told herself that. This was an obligation, nothing more. But the melody in the attic wouldn't let her pretend. It wasn't coming from the wind. It was coming from a violin case, half buried beneath a stack of faded quilts in the corner. The moment Isabelle saw it, something inside her stirred, familiar yet distant, like a childhood scent you can't quite place. She knelt and pulled the case free. It was her grandmother's violin. The wood was worn, but the craftsmanship was undeniable. This wasn't a display piece. It had been played, loved. She brushed her fingers over the latch, and for a moment she was 6 years old again, hiding beneath Eleanor's piano as the notes from the violin filled the house like sunlight. Isabelle opened the case. Inside, beneath the velvet lining, was a folded piece of parchment. Her name was written in Eleanor's handwriting. Isabelle, for when the music finds you again. She unfolded it with trembling hands, unaware that this was the beginning of something far greater than a melody. It was the beginning of a legacy she hadn't realized was hers to carry. Isabelle's feet seemed to wander without direction that rainy afternoon, yet somehow they led her to the narrow cobblestone street she hadn't walked in years. Tucked between a florist and a dusty old bookstore was Marigold Strings, a modest violin shop where time itself had seemed to slow down. The bell chimed as she entered, and the familiar scent of varnished wood and aged sheet music wrapped around her like a comforting shawl. She hadn't meant to come here, but grief has a way of steering us toward forgotten sanctuaries. Behind the counter stood a man, his back turned, adjusting the bridge of a violin with delicate precision. His presence was quiet, but undeniable. He wore a navy waistcoat over a crisp white shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows. His movements were methodical, almost reverent. "I'm looking for a tuner," Isabelle said, her voice tentative, though she wasn't sure why she had spoken at all. The man looked up. His eyes were a calm, deep gray, like the hush of a stage just before the first note. There was no impatience, no curiosity, just stillness. And in that stillness, Isabelle felt seen. He said, "You've come to the right place, though, judging by your hands, you're no stranger to strings." Her fingers, still calloused from her youth and music school, betrayed her. "I used to play," she admitted, "but life, it asked me to stop." He gave a soft nod, as if he understood life's unspoken demands. Alexander Hartman, he introduced, offering a hand that felt like an anchor. Luthier, listener, occasional keeper of stories. Isabelle smiled at that. She didn't know then that meeting Alexander would be the first ripple in a tide that would carry her back to herself. Over the next few weeks, Isabelle found excuses to revisit Marigold Strings. Sometimes she'd bring her mother's old violin for a cleaning it didn't need. Other times, she'd pretend to browse sheet music she couldn't afford. But mostly, she came for the conversations. Gentle, unhurried dialogues that seemed to mend something frayed inside her. Alexander had an uncanny ability to listen without intruding. He never asked why she looked tired or why she flinched when certain songs played on the shop radio. He simply offered space. Space to be. One rainy afternoon, as she lingered near the counter, Alexander placed a small, worn music box between them. Its lacquer was chipped, but the delicate carvings hinted at once prized craftsmanship. "This belonged to my mother," he said, gently winding it. The melody that emerged was haunting, a violin solo that seemed to echo from some far-off attic of the heart. "Is that original?" Two souls attuned to the same silent rhythm. I host small gatherings in the evenings. People who still believe music can heal things words cannot. You should come. Isabelle hesitated. The world outside had taught her to keep her heart guarded, but Alexander's invitation felt like a door gently nudging open. "I'll think about it," she whispered. But in truth, she knew she would. The evening air was crisp when Isabelle found herself outside Alexander's apartment. The building was old, but well kept, much like everything he cherished. She could hear the soft hum of strings from behind the wooden door, accompanied by quiet laughter. When she entered, the atmosphere struck her. The gathering was small, a mosaic of people, young and old, seated in a circle, cluttered with violins, cellos, and even a stray harp. No one asked who she was. No one pried. Instead, a chair was offered, and a gentle nod from Alexander welcomed her into their fold. That night, stories intertwined with melodies. Each person played a piece that carried a memory. A mother's lullaby, a grandfather's folk tune, a sister's duet. It wasn't a concert. It was communion. When it came to Isabelle's turn, she hesitated. "My mother used to play something in the attic," she began, voice wavering. "I was too young to understand it then. I only remember fragments." Alexander handed her a violin. Not hers, but one that felt surprisingly familiar in her grip. "Fragments," he said, "are sometimes the most honest beginnings." As the bow met the strings, the melody stumbled out, hesitant, fragile, but with each note, memories surfaced. Her mother's soft humming, the creak of the attic floor, the way sunlight filtered through old wooden beams as the music enveloped them both. When she finished, the room was silent, not out of politeness, but reverence. Alexander's eyes met hers. "I believe that melody was waiting for you." Over the following weeks,
Alexander and Isabelle found themselves orbiting around each other with a quiet gravity neither dared to name. He would bring her coffee, and she'd show him the old sheet music she'd found tucked away in the attic. Slowly, the room filled with the sound of their intertwined lives. One afternoon, as a soft drizzle tapped against the windows, Alexander played the melody again. This time, Isabelle hummed along, tentatively at first, but with a surprising clarity. The violin's weeping tones merged with her voice, creating a haunting harmony that made Alexander pause mid-bow. "That harmony," he said softly, "it's like the song was waiting for your voice." Isabelle felt a warmth bloom in her chest. For so long, she had been a listener. Now, she was a part of the music itself. In a dust-covered box marked Marguerite, Isabelle found letters, handwritten notes from her grandmother to a dearest one, who she realized was Alexander's father, Jonathan. The letters told of secret rehearsals, of a melody they had crafted together, a melody that had never found its audience. Isabelle realized the violin had been passed to her as a vessel not only of music, but of an unfinished love story. When she shared the letters with Alexander, his fingers trembled. "My father never spoke of her, but I can feel it. They were kindred spirits." That night, the melody they played wasn't just notes. It was a conversation, echoing across generations. Isabelle had an idea. Let's share the melody, not with a concert hall, but right here, small, intimate. They set up a modest stage on the rooftop of the apartment. Neighbors peeked out from their balconies, drawn by the curiosity of a violin's soft tuning. As Alexander played and Isabelle's voice wove through the air, the city paused. The melody, once a secret, now danced freely under the open sky. When they finished, no one clapped. Instead, there was a hush, an understanding that some performances are meant to be felt, not applauded.
After the rooftop concert, Isabelle confessed to Alexander her deepest fear. "All my life, I felt like I was standing in someone else's spotlight. My mother's, my grandmother's. I never thought I had a story of my own." Alexander reached out, his hand resting gently over hers. "You do, Isabelle. You're not carrying their legacy like a weight. You're extending it. Music is love stretched across time. And now it's your song." It wasn't a grand declaration, but in that quiet assurance, Isabelle felt a piece of herself begin to mend. Together, they began restoring the attic, not into a museum of memories, but a living, breathing music room. They painted the walls in warm tones. Alexander set up a piano beside the old violin stand. Isabella hung the letters and sheet music in delicate frames, not as relics, but as pieces of an ongoing story. Soon, the attic wasn't just a personal refuge. It became a space where neighbors, children, and fellow musicians gathered to learn, to listen, to heal. One afternoon, a woman knocked on the music room's door. She introduced herself as Clara, a violinist who had been mentored by Alexander's father decades ago. "I saw the video of your rooftop performance," Clara said, eyes glistening. "That melody, Jonathan and Marguerite used to play it during rehearsals. They called it the unfinished lullaby. I never thought I'd hear it again." Her visit bridged yet another gap in the invisible chain of legacy. Isabelle and Alexander realized that their story was not theirs alone. It belonged to all who had been touched by the melody, directly or indirectly.
One evening, as the golden glow of sunset bathed the music room, Alexander looked at Isabelle. "We've been so busy honoring the past. Maybe it's time to write something new." Together, they began composing a new melody, one that borrowed from the old, but carried their own story, their laughter, their fears, their shared silences. It was a song that didn't mourn what was lost, but celebrated what had been found. On her birthday, Isabelle found a small velvet box inside the violin case. Inside was a pendant, an elegant treble clef intertwined with a delicate M. Alexander's note was simple: for Marguerite, for music, for moments yet to come. Isabelle's tears were soft, grateful ones. It wasn't an extravagant gift, but it held the weight of history, of connection, of love. One rainy evening, Isabelle found herself alone in the music room. The violin rested against the chair, the air thick with quiet. She picked up the bow, closed her eyes, and played, not from sheet music, but from memory, from feeling. In that moment, she felt Marguerite's presence not as a ghost, but as a gentle nudge, a whisper, reminding her that the true legacy of music isn't perfection, it's presence. That night, Isabelle sat by the attic window, pen in hand, and began writing a letter. "To my future daughter," or "to whoever finds this melody next." She poured her heart into the pages, telling of how music had found her when words couldn't, how love had found her when she thought she was invisible. She placed the letter beneath the violin's velvet lining, continuing the chain of invisible legacies. Months later, Isabelle and Alexander stood side by side at a community concert. Their music school had grown. The attic had become a sanctuary for countless souls seeking solace through song. As they played the unfinished lullaby one final time, a hush fell over the crowd. But this time, the melody felt complete. Not because the notes had changed, but because they had. The violin, once a relic of the past, was now a vessel for the future. As the final note lingered, Alexander glanced at Isabelle. Their hearts aligned not just by music, but by an understanding. Invisible legacies never die. They evolve. And as long as someone listens, the music will always play on.
If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a like and leave a kind comment. To help the channel stay motivated to create more great videos, please hit the subscribe button. Wishing you happiness and peace in the light and love of God.